The best of money matters. Wealth Tracker.
Welcome to the Wealth Tracker, where we dive into the uncharted territories of niche investment strategies that promise to redefine wealth. Hello, I'm Hongbin Jeong. Now, traditional venture capital, long dominated by closed networks and high barriers to entry, is being challenged by a new wave of technologies that promise to make funding more accessible, transparent, and efficient. At the forefront of this shift are Web3 and AI, tools that have potential to not only level the playing field for founders, but also empower a new generation of investors to participate earlier, smarter, and on a global scale. But with these changes come big questions. Are we truly moving toward a more inclusive funding ecosystem, or simply replacing one set of gatekeepers with another? Can decentralization and algorithmic decision-making, does it genuinely reduce bias, or do they risk automating the same inequalities? And as the lines blur between institutional and individual investors, what will trust, diligence, and value creation look like in this new paradigm? Well, to find out more, joining me now is Moe Iman, who is the CEO and founder of Founders Hub Network, OnlyFounders. Moe, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on the show. Quite excited to get right into the discussion.
Very excited indeed. Well, Moe, let's start with the big picture here. What do you see as the current state of early stage investing, especially for startups trying to break through without traditional connections or backing?
Most of the early stage market currently, even in 2025, is structurally broken, especially for most founders coming from underprivileged regions, coming from a background that they were not associated with any form of family, a privileged university. Capital, in its sense, is concentrated in a small network of insiders. And if you're not already, let's call it, in the room or in the inner circle, you're either ignored or forced to dilute too early just to stay alive and stay afloat. This is where the promise of the Web3 was supposed to democratize access, but most of the capital in Web3 still behaves like legacy VC, which flows just from one inner circle to another inner circle.
So what are the structural flaws in the current early stage funding ecosystem that Web3 and AI are best suited to address?
Well, the early stage funding system is built on a few outdated assumptions. The first one is capital is smart, founders are needy. What this really means is most VCs still parade around pretending that they know it all, even though they might have never actually been involved in a vertical or an industry that they're investing into, which gets them to take asymmetric advantages of the founders. Most diligence that's run by even tier one VCs right now is still qualitative, biased, and relationship driven. So an example here is quite recently I came across a post on LinkedIn where a pretend to be founder is now being sued in the US because he changed his LinkedIn profile and updated it to say that he's an ex-Stanford and applied and reached out to multiple VCs, and he got 27 proposals to invest in his startup that doesn't exist. And the second one is reputation, even to date, flows through access, not through proof. What this means is based on who you know, who the founder's family knows, which school or university did the founder go to, there is a higher probability of them getting funded. So exactly the point that I made earlier, if you put on your resume or you say you're an ex-Stanford or an ex-Ivy League, the possibility of you getting that interview or that investment call goes up exponentially as compared to someone who might come from, let's say, Thailand or comes from Lagos. They say that the rules are the same, but they aren't. And there really isn't any standardized proof-based layer for reputation that scales with performance of these founders and their startups. The third one is data. Data is still very siloed. By the time it flows from one party to another party, you really have to take someone else's word for it by saying it's valid, it's authenticated, and it's standardized, but that's not the case. And the fourth one is no shared memory, really no incentive alignment. Fundraising to date is a very zero-sum game. Once the round is closed, most early contributors are forgotten. There's really no protocol level recognition for early conviction. So loyalty in early stage funding, and primarily in Web3, it's still very optional, and so is accountability.
Very interesting. Well, then, Moe, let's dive in deeper about Web3 here. Beyond the buzz, where do you see real practical use cases of blockchain and early stage investing today?
I think the space is still in its infancy. Coming to the application of blockchain and AI when it comes to fundraising. What Web3 does very well is it enables proof-based, permissionless infrastructure. translated, attestation, reputation, ownership are all made verifiable on-chain. So letters of experience, education certificates, letter of association or recommendations cannot be faked or forged. This is solved right now quite easily through Web3 and blockchain. Another big thing about it is with AI, it replaces gatekeeping with reputation modeling, which can continuously score and contextualize founders' quality, product momentum, and market traction across multiple data points, far beyond what a traditional investment analyst could do. And it builds a living profile of a credible, not a static pitch deck, because pitch decks, just as a startup evolves, they change. So you can never evaluate a startup based on a pitch deck that's even 3 months old, because given that technology right now is moving at an exponential speed, a pitch deck that was created by a startup 3 months back could have changed considerably in the last 90 days.
Then how does decentralization challenge the power structures of traditional VC, and what's the trade-off here?
So this is a discussion that we have often, if not every day, as to A, why decentralization, B, how does this shift the VC power structures, and C, what's the trade-off? What decentralization simply does is it disarms VC's gatekeeping power. The current way that funding has been dictated, the way funds flow currently. Decentralizing fundraising disarms this small group of VCs. What decentralization really does is it takes away this whole charade of warm intros, hidden terms, backroom deals, and makes it all transparent. So both the retail investors, the founders, and the VCs are very clear as to what the terms are that they're getting into, what the trade-offs are, and what really is the payout and what's the incentive for each party.
Okay. So do you think we're approaching a tipping point where the majority of startup funding could be, community driven or on-chain?
The short answer for this is no, not currently, but we are getting there. There is a reason that even till date, shifting power has never been the ideal approach to any solution. Web3 was created with the narrative that centralization has its own challenges, has its limitations. And with decentralization, we're able to better share responsibility, accountability, and the control. Taking that same approach towards VC and fundraising is a long-term game. It is not something that's going to happen overnight, but we see this happening already, that trust layers are being created. There are micro checks that are being written. There are startups that are already able to raise funds. One of the very interesting example of this is traditional Web2 businesses entering Web3 and now tokenizing their existing loyalty programs, their user base, and having to incentivize their existing users through a form of tokenization. And this helps them raise more funds as opposed to taking the traditional IPO route.
Okay. Well, over in terms of AI here, AI is increasingly being used to filter deal flow and analyze founder potential. But Mo, how reliable is that, and what are the limits we should be aware of?
Ooh, I laugh on this because just like Web3, AI is still, I think, very much in its infancy. But what AI and Web3 do really well as an infra is that they can raise the floor of access and standardization. What AI models can really do is they're only as good as the data and the framing that they're trained on, right? So at the end, it's still a machine with a large language model and different types of language models. What AI can do and is doing in Web3 and for fundraising in general is it helps identify quite early where biases take place and eliminate those biases. So imagine if you had two portfolio companies right in front of you and you had no information as to the race, the region, the religion, or the country of residence or the country of origin of the founder, and just pure data to speculate on, which is the go-to-market, the market opportunity, the traction, the IP. You might make better decisions as opposed to looking at two profiles, one that's an Ivy League and one that's an Asian founder, looking at an Asian founder and saying, well, they don't need to raise as much as someone in the West does.
Okay. Well, can AI truly remove bias from investing decisions then, or does it risk automating the same biases we see in human-led VC today?
AI, I think, doesn't really eliminate bias. What it really does is it reframes it. So if you're training data is built on traditional VC decisions, traditional VC inputs, reports, data formats. You're just automating legacy prejudice, right? And discrimination in a way to say. So for AI to be useful, AI must be trained on diverse performance-based inputs and consistently audited. AI models aren't something that most people think of where you program it, you deploy it, and you forget about it. It's AI is almost like a part of your family. I wouldn't call it a human being, but it is something that needs constant nurturing, education, and reframing.
Right, that's fair. Well, overall, Mo, then what is the state of both technologies, Web3 and AI, now that businesses should be aware of? I mean, what are some misconceptions that hold the technologies back?
Most businesses are still treating them like novelty features. AI is already in the process of reshaping workflows and product strategy. Where we see this, and I've seen this now being part of the Llama Incubator program for the Singapore government, where we're working hands-on with 30 plus startups. And they're so interesting when we look at the initiatives, the opportunities, and the problems that they're actually solving, from food management to defense to education to healthcare to first responders, to creating accessibility in regions that are inaccessible. AI it's limitless, but I think it breaks down to at which point and what capacity do individuals, organizations, including funds, including VCs, are looking at its application, and how open, reluctant someone really is in understanding and exploring its potential.
Okay, so with these tech shifts, do you see the founder-investor dynamic changing? Will future founders pitch algorithms more than people?
Yes, so pitching it's a part of the journey. I think it's something that will never go away. It's part of the journey of being a founder of a startup, of building certain soft skills, being able to stand in front of an audience that you don't know and be judged, and still be confident enough to communicate the urgency, solution, the product, and its impact. Algorithms will be the first filter and eventually the standard. So founders will start earning access through verified proof and not really through the way they dress or they speak. We've seen this across working with over 200 founders in the last 5 years, that some of the best founders are introverted. They are limited to their vocabulary, and they are quite shy when it comes to social gatherings and having to have a conversation. But when it comes to iteration, building out the tech stack, they are just hands down some of the best prodigies in the world.
Okay, well then overall here, Mo, how do we ensure that the future of investing, one that's driven by Web3 and AI, is inclusive, ethical, and sustainable?
I think it has to do with how we build these protocols, where transparency really is a default and incentives are traceable. This is where it's going to be the foundation. So we're looking at Web 1 to Web 2, where Web 2 was considered centralized. We have entered Web 3, where the narrative that's dominating it is decentralization. However, in reality, there is a big centralization factor even within Web 3. We see that with the way funds flow. We see that with the way talent moves. We see that with the way certain founders from certain groups are highlighted as the savior. But what we're seeing now is a shift towards, I might be crazy to say this, but Web 4, whereby your identity becomes your reputation layer. One of the examples I would use here, and for those of you who spend time on Twitter or X, you'll see from time to time there is this increase in the mention of a startup or a product or a project. And those narratives are led by individuals or collectives known as KOLs, or key opinion leaders. There was a time when being a key opinion leader meant you'd have to spend at least a decade in a vertical, become a subject matter expert, and you do it because you're extremely passionate about it and driven and concerned. And now in Web3, you're getting paid 4 to 5 to sometimes 6 figures to talk about a startup. So that's not really KOL, and that's not really honest narrative and value creation. With Web4, what we're going to start seeing is that people will be held accountable for the way they promote they talk about, they uplift a certain product, a certain startup or a certain solution. Because if you take all the elements away, what's left is what is your word worth. And currently, a lot of people's word means very little. You could go on Twitter for engagement farming. You can do that on Facebook. You could do that on TikTok. You could do that on any other social media platform. But what happens when you are given a score based on whether you were supporting someone knowing intentionally that they had bad intentions, or they were selling substandard products and solutions, or you were actually supporting someone because based off the value that it creates, the problems that it solves, and the positive impact that it has on an economy.
Amazing. Well, some great insights from you there. Thank you so much, Mo, for joining me today.
Appreciate having me, Hongbin.
Thank you. That was Moe Iman, who is the CEO and founder of Founders Hub Network of OnlyFounders. This has been the Wealth Tracker with me, Hongbin Jeong.
Before acting on the information on Money FM, please consider if it's suitable for your own investment objectives, financial situation, and risk tolerance. To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.